Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. Freemasons, a secret occult society where you have to swear with your hand on a Bible under threat of death, having your throat cut, not to divulge the secrets. And organizations, lodges in every town, every city, almost all over the world. And all members swear to obey the master. And I suspect all the masters of all the lodges swear to obey the master above them. It's like the pyramid, and so forth. Rosicrucians, similar organization. Knights of Columbus, Knights of Malta, Illuminati. Even the witches' covens and other organizations into the occult. Kabbalah organizations. And I suspect also the rabbis of the who study the mysticism in the Talmud, Zohar, Midrash, all these different books. What do all those people know that we don't know? And what does it mean? So as you know, I make videos after I read material. And in this case, I thought I'd take another look at the Morals and Dogma, series number 85. This will be part 12. So, 1 hour, 2 hour videos, and this is part 12. So it's got to be 20 hours or more. And I thought I'd look at an interesting degree, the 32nd degree. Now, as you know from watching my videos, I am not without a little knowledge. Being humble and modest, because I realize there's this much to learn and I only know this much. But at least I know that much. And it grows ever so slightly when you research and study and keep an open mind. So with that said, if you're interested in trying to figure out what do they think? What are these theologies, the secret societies, this Helena Blavatsky, the secret doctrine, the Kabbalah, all the stuff they try to keep secret, versus what we know. So I guess we could call it the anti-what we know group. We know what they want us to know over here. But we don't know what they don't want us to know, unless you get initiated. So call this group here what we all know, whether you're a Muslim or a Christian or a Buddhist or Hindu citizen, and other religions and other peoples all over the world. Even the shamans knew some of the stuff over here where you don't know than the people over here, the citizens in Peru and Mexico and the Aborigines. So there's something that people knows, and there are things that people do not know. So we're going to look at some of the stuff that people do not know or think about on a daily basis. We know that we know what we know. This could be a funny conversation or a comedy act, because that's what they want us to know. True or false, that's what they want us to know. So let's just take a look first at the symbol on page 839 of the 32nd degree, the sublime prince of the royal secret. There we go, the royal secret. The stuff we don't know because it's a secret. So you got this man with two heads, a sun and a moon on the top of his head, a T with a circle on top with like horns, and the T means divine. The circle on top is supposed to be a snake, and it eats its tail, so that would be an eternal snake. And the two lines on top seem to be horns. Who would have thought that? The six-pointed star with rays coming out of it, and some other stars with other symbols, and one with a T with a circle with a dot in the middle. So anyways, all that, and a man standing on a dragon, and the dragon is sitting on a globe, could be Earth, or Nibiru. I think Nibiru is symbolic. It's some kind of analogy for something coming. FYI. And of course the ball has wings on it like Nibiru does. So when you look at this stuff and take the time to look at the symbols, it's rather interesting. Pause your computer and just take a long, hard look. Look at the pyramid on the globe. Looks like a couple pyramids. And the wings on the globe, the dragon, the guy with the two heads, the T, the square in his hand, and the compass in the other hand. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars, the sun and the moon. Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike, the Bible for the Freemasons. What edition is this? What year? I know they were publishing them year after year. 1871. So this wasn't something they wanted to be out there to the public. Washington, D.C., 1962. So it was entered according to the Act of Congress, copyrighted in 1871, so the copyrights, of course, would be expired if there were such a thing. But this reprint was 1962, and Albert Pike lived from 1859 to 1891. So let's read about the sublime prince of the royal secret, the master of the royal secret, the occult science, occult means secret, of the ancient magi, magician, was concealed under the shadows of the ancient mysteries. It was imperfectly revealed, or rather disfigured, by the Gnostics. Those are people who knew secret knowledge, Gnostics. It was imperfectly revealed, or rather disfigured by the Gnostics. It is guessed at under the obscurities that covered the pretended crimes of the Templars, the Knights Templars, who were the people before the Freemasons, when the Templars were persecuted, arrested, and put in prison or killed by the Church, the Pope, and I think along with the King of France. Apparently they were after the Templars' wealth. And it is found enveloped in enigmas that seem impenetrable in the rites of highest masonry. So the occult science of the ancient magicians was concealed under the shadows of the ancient mysteries. Magism was the science of Abraham and Orpheus, of Confucius and Zoroaster. So magism, which would be the science of the magicians, it was the dogmas of this science that were engraven on the tables of stone at Hanok and Trismegistus. Moses purified and revealed them, for that is the meaning of the word reveal. He covered them with a new veil when he made of the Holy Kabbalah the exclusive heritage of the people of Israel. So in the Encyclopedia Judaica, if you go back and watch my videos on the Kabbalah, how many did I make so far? Wow. 7 2-hour videos on the Kabbalah, 14 hours. And I'm going to go back to the Encyclopedia Judaica on all those topics, Zionism, and talking about Jewish activity in Romania and other countries. The Encyclopedia Judaica is invaluable. But anyways, it said, when I did make those videos, those 7, series number 105, by the way, under Encyclopedia, and the topic would be Kabbalah. And it said that the Kabbalah was the culture of, historically, of the Jews. FYI. So we can say that it's mentioned here in Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, and I am becoming a little bit familiar with these Kabbalistic studies, mysticism and secret doctrine, etc., etc., Rosicrucianism, and there does seem to be a similarity in all these teachings. All right. And I know the best way to start to understand this stuff is just to look at the pictures and read it again and again and again and again. It's like reading the Bible. But then you start to pick it up. So anyways, Moses covered them with a new veil, these occult secrets, when he made of the Holy Kabbalah the exclusive heritage of the people of Israel, and the inviolable secret of its priest, violable. So the priest, and they want to rebuild King Solomon's temple. I think there's a connection with all this New Age and New World Order. Of course there is. 9/11, World War I, World War II, communism, Zionism, and all the secret societies all over the world. Lucifer, satanic symbols we're seeing everywhere, satanic rituals everywhere. Do you think it has something to do with this? Of course it does. The mysteries of Thebes and Eleusis preserved among the nations some symbols of it, already altered, and the mysterious key whereof was lost among the instruments of an ever-growing superstition. Jerusalem, the murderess of her prophets. Remember, Jesus accused the Pharisees, the priest of the temple in Jerusalem, that ye are the killers of your prophets. So from the divine world, the world of God, that sent Jesus, apparently other prophets were sent, and apparently these people murdered their prophets, and so often prostituted to the false gods of the Syrians and the Babylonians. So they switched from God to these false gods, had at length in its turn lost the holy word, when a prophet announced to the Magi by the consecrated star of initiation, came to rend asunder the worn veil of the old temple, in order to give the church a new tissue of legends and symbols that still and ever conceals from the profane. The profane are all the rest of us uninitiated people. That's what the Freemasons call everybody else that's not a Freemason, profane. And ever preserves to the elect the same truths. It was the remembrance of this scientific and religious absolute, of this doctrine that is summed up in a word, of this word, in fine, alternately lost and found again, was that was transmitted to the elect of all the ancient initiations. It was this same remembered, preserved, and perhaps profaned in the celebrated order of the Templars that became for all of the secret associations of the Rosy Cross, the Rosicrucians, of the Illuminati, and of the Hermetic Freemasons, the reason of their strange rites and their signs more or less conventional, and above all, of their mutual devotedness and of their power. So I just read in this sentence here, the secret associations of the Rosy Cross, the Illuminati, the Hermetics, Freemasons, and the reason for their strange rites. I mentioned all these things. Secret societies worldwide are connected, and it says it right here on page 840 in the Morals and Dogma, and I shall show you. And I'll hold it here for a second. You can pause your computer, and right where my finger is there, those 4 lines connect the Illuminati. Real enough, it's right in these pages. Rosicrucians, Hermetic Freemasons. You got it? Get it? The Gnostics, the people who have secret knowledge, caused the Gnostics caused the Gnosis to be prescribed by the Christians, and the official sanctuary was closed again against the high initiation. Thus the hierarchy of knowledge was compromitted by the violences and usurping ignorance, and the disorders of the sanctuary are reproduced in the state, for always, willingly or unwillingly, the king is sustained by the priest, and it is from the eternal sanctuary of the divine instruction that the powers of the earth, to ensure themselves durability, must receive their consecration and their force. So apparently when other forces other than these secret societies get the information, it gets compromised, and violence of usurping ignorance and disorders of the sanctuary are reproduced in the state. The Hermetic science of the early Christian ages, cultivated by the Gerber Aphrobus and others of the Arabs, studied by the chiefs of the Templars, embodied in certain symbols of the higher degrees of Freemasonry, may be accurately defined as the Kabbalah in active realization, or the magic of the works. It has 3 analogous degrees: religious, philosophical, and physical realization. Its religious realization is the durable foundation of the true empire and the true priesthood that rule in the realm of human intellect. Its philosophical realization is the establishment of an absolute doctrine known in all times as the Holy Doctrine. And remember, I've gone over Helena Blavatsky's the Holy Secret Doctrine, and Isis Unveiled, and other material by Helena Blavatsky, who formed the Theosophist Society, which is a precursor or forerunner to the New Age material. And they created the Lucifer Publishing Company, later Lucas Publishing Company, and also were producing Lucas magazines, which you can probably go on used book sites and find some of those. I've been going over that material. And remember, when you're listening to this stuff, if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, it's because you're just not familiar with it yet. But remember, I'm almost probably up to 500 hours of videos on my 350 plus videos on the YouTube channel, reading hundreds of books, watching thousands of videos, hundreds of magazines, and tens of thousands of press releases, paying attention to what's going on in the world, studying different kinds of material, legislative action the government's taken, like the Patriot Act. Things like that people don't know about when you have the gold fringe on the flag, the U.S. flag. It means the country is in martial law. And if you watch the president speak and other people, you'll see the gold fringe. And if you go look that up, you'll find out that maybe since World War II or I, they never ceased having the United States under martial law. We're all being fooled. So it seems. And much more legislative activity, deception, 9/11, World War I, World War II, the building up of Israel as a major power in the world, seemingly destined to be the controller of the world from Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. They are at that hub, the crossroads of the continents, and they're at the same place where the ancients built the pyramids and all kinds of other monuments, a huge portion of civilization before the Great Flood, apparently where even the Atlanteans, when that continent sank, and other continental activity worldwide, that area was a major hub of intelligence and technologies, mysticism. Then the Great Flood came, and it seems to me from all of my research, because the DNA, got a bug here, DNA was corrupted with creating all kinds of beasts, weirdly enough, genetic manipulation and cellular manipulation with foods, GMO, genetically modified, and even cloning and all kinds of other crazy stuff, excessive amounts of electromagnetic radiations and sky-spraying chemicals dumped in the sky and even put in our foods and our water, fluoride. So it seems something strange is going on in the world, preparing us for something. All right, we were talking about the holy doctrine and of the Plutarch. I guess this was a famous writer back then. Plutarch. In the treatise de la Inside Osira, sounds like Inside Osiris, speaks at large but mysteriously of a hierarchical instruction to secure the uninterrupted succession of adepts among the initiates. So throughout history, the ages, they wanted to have an uninterrupted succession of adepts, initiated people into the mysteries and secrets. Its physical realization in the discovery and application into the microcosm or little world of the creative law that incessantly peoples the great universe. So the creative law that incessantly peoples the great universe. Measure a corner of the creation and multiply that space in proportional progression, and the entire infinite will multiply its circles filled with the universes, which will pass in proportional segments between the ideal and the elongated branches of your compass. So a lot of this is written so that you won't understand it, but I have discovered if you keep reading it, you begin to understand it. Now suppose that from any point wherever of the infinite, above you a hand holds another compass, or a square. The lines of the celestial triangle will necessarily meet those of the compass of science to form the mysterious Star of Solomon. Lest we forget, they are digging all over the Middle East, in particular around the Jerusalem, and they plan on, they're looking for artifacts, archaeology, and they're working and planning on rebuilding King Solomon's temple. And lest we also not forget that King Solomon had a six-pointed magic ring that he could call forth demons, angels maybe also, so he could communicate with the divine, the other world. And if it was demons and fallen angels, Nephilim, archons, watchers, mentioned in the Bible, it would explain a lot about our reality and what's going on today. So like I said, if you keep studying and watching my videos and other people's videos, you can pick up on this stuff. All hypotheses, significantly probable, all hypotheses, scientifically probable, are the last gleams of the twilight of knowledge or its last shadows. So are we regaining ancient knowledge? And who is regaining ancient knowledge? Think about our history today. It wasn't more than 100 years ago that we certainly didn't have TV. Radio was just starting. Steam engines and then the combustion engine with the vehicles were just starting. So if you go back 200 years, it was the horse and buggy days. For the past thousands of years, horse and buggy days. So advancements in technology just happened virtually yesterday. And if there is this divine world, for some reason, this technology, this growth, was introduced into our society intentionally. Yes? No? What do you think? Faith begins where reason sinks exhausted. So faith begins where reason sinks exhausted. And right now, reason, logically thinking, is becoming difficult because of the weirdness in the world. And I think that's being caused on purpose. And faith begins where reason sinks exhausted. So faith in God, in my case Christian, belief in what Jesus taught, to love one another, forgive people. Not try to be part of a group of people who want to bring back a golden age and rule the world in a tyrannical fashion, like the Hunger Games movie, and spy on everybody, and control the finances so that when the masses of people become harmonious, they're making some money and they're enjoying it, and they're having a backyard, going to the park, or buying a boat. Then they crash the whole system and make life miserable for everybody. It's like a roller coaster. And it makes these forces that control our world in secret very wealthy. Beyond the human reason is the divine reason, and to our feebleness, the great absurdity, and the infinite absurd, which confounds us and which we believe. So the infinite absurd. So again, I'm saying they're causing the anarchy, the chaos, and the absurdity. For the Master, the compass of faith is above the square of reason, but both rest upon the Holy Scriptures, combine to form the blazing star of truth. And like I've also said when I talk to people, or you see the common denominator, what the public thinks, a lot of people these days are denying the Christian religion, any religion. Even the young people, or now the old people, this has been going on a while, will tell you that Jesus was just a myth and all that. But yet these people and this kind of material talk about Holy Scriptures, acknowledge Jesus and everything else, and the blazing star. As you listen to me read from this material, all eyes do not see alike. That's true. We all perceive things in our own way. Even the visible creation is not, for all who look upon it, of one form and one color. Our brain is a book printed within and without. And the two writings are, with all men more or less confused. So the visible universe and the invisible universe, a lot of people are confused. The primary tradition of the single revelation has been preserved under the name of Kabbalah. So the primary tradition, like I said, it was the ancient religion or teachings of the historic Jewish people. And I say that, interestingly enough, to point out, there were the original Jewish people called Hebrews in the Middle East, probably a brown-skinned people, Middle Eastern. And then there was Khazaria 1,000 years ago in the north, could be white or even yellow skin next to Mongolia, who embraced the Jewish religion, and a lot of rabbis were sent to Khazaria in that area to teach Judaism. And were they teaching Talmudic Judaism or Torah Judaism? Torah Judaism was the Old Testament, the Ten Commandments, the good Jewish teaching, Orthodox. The Talmudic is a Reformed type of teaching, and what I would call the sinister type teachings. I guess they can even have sex with young children, and they can kill non-Jews and steal from non-Jews. It's allowed, whereas to kill or steal from Jews is prohibited. So some kind of really crazy rules there, where they think that they're divine spiritual beings, and the non-Jews, if they do have spirits, it's demonic spirits, but more than likely they consider us cattle, and we're put on this earth to serve them. The difference between Talmud and Torah Jewry: Talmud is the good one, Torah is the bad one. For me to simplify and paraphrase volumes of books, huge. So I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that. Okay, so the primary tradition of a single revelation has been preserved under the name Kabbalah by the priesthood of Israel. There you go. The Kabbalistic doctrine, which was also the dogma of the Magi, the magicians, and of Hermes, is contained in the Sefer Yetzirah, the Zohar, and the Talmud, just like I just said. According to that doctrine, the Absolute is the being in which the world is, Word, W-O-R-D, the Word that is utterance and expression of being and life. So it says in the Bible, in the beginning God, the Word, God created the heaven and earth, but it was, in the beginning was the Word. I think that's the very first sentence in the Bible. In the beginning was the Word. And with the Word, God created everything. Words are vibrations. Again, the stuff starts to make a little sense. So all this vibrations, like water, is a combination of hydrogen and oxygen. So you got two gases, and by some kind of vibrational reaction, they become water. So everything around me is all atoms and molecules, but vibrational reactions and codes and frequencies, even the vibrational resonant frequency on the planet beats like a heart. I had to stop my camera for a minute and think. The Schumann resonance, it's like 7.8 hertz on the planet. So it's a heartbeat, and I suspect there are other vibrations, and also another whole realm of physics that science today, or at least the science they want us to know about, they don't want us to know about. But this other kind of attraction and repulsion, physics exists. And that part of that is not electricity, voltages and all that, and frequencies, but it's something to do with the gravity forces. And I think some of that's coming out these days, and they even probably have anti-gravity devices. Apparently, the ancients, before the Great Flood, did have anti-gravity vehicles. And apparently, it is as simple as the electromagnetic physics we all know. So if it ever gets out into the open, this other physics involving the mechanisms of gravity, instead of electromagnetic waves of different frequencies and their forces and reactions, it'll change our world. So when they're talking about magicians in here and magi, I suspect they're aware of some of these laws of nature, just to take the mystery out of the mystery. Magic is that which it is. It is by itself like the mathematics. For it is the exact and absolute science of nature and its laws. Things I just said, but in plain English. Magic is the science of the ancient magi, magicians, in the Christian religion, which has imposed silence on all lying oracles. So people who would tell things or communicate with the other world, imposing silence on all lying oracles, and put an end to the prestiges of the false gods, itself reveres these magi, magicians, who came from the east, guided by a star, to adore the Savior of the world in his cradle. So if you know about Jesus' birth in Bethlehem, there was a star that came in the sky, moving along, and some kings from the east of the Middle East, that would be towards the Orient, not from the west towards Europe, but were following that star because they knew something about this secret knowledge, and this star with prophecy, maybe, whatever, God's world, and they knew this star was supposed to lead them to the Savior of the world, Jesus. And they even told the king of Israel, when they came, what they had foreseen, prophesied, and that's why the king of Israel had declared all children under 2 years old, male children, to be killed. That's not right in here. I'm just throwing the rest of the story because it's mentioning guided by a star to adore the Savior of the world in his cradle. So even in this material here, they acknowledge Jesus. But if they want the public to not believe it, that should be a bit concerning when it's apparently part of this secret knowledge. Tradition also gives these magi, the magicians, the title of kings. Like I said, it was the 3 kings who showed up in Bethlehem at Jesus' birth. Because initiation into magism, magicians, constitute a genuine royalty, and because the grand art of the magi is styled by all the adepts, all the people who get selected to be initiated, the royal art, or the holy realm, or empire's sanctum regum. The star which guided them is that same blazing star, the image whereof we find in all initiations. To the alchemist, it is the sign of the quintessence. To the magi's, the grand arcanum. To the Kabbalist, the sacred pentagram. Well, I think the pentagram is a witch's symbol. We have a pentagram, which is the government building agency with lots of powers all over the world. And they use it a lot in symbols. Like I said, it seems to be some kind of magic symbol. The study of this pentagram could not but lead the Magi to the knowledge of the new name, which was about to raise itself above all names and cause all creatures capable of adoration to bend the knee. With have been Jesus. Magic unites in one and the same science whatsoever philosophy can possess, that is most certain, and religion of the ineffable and of the eternal. Bear with me, trying to read these sentences in a clear, concise way. But to the alchemist, it is the sign of the quintessence. That means quintessential, everything. To the magist, the magician, the grand arcanum. To the Kabbalist, the sacred pentagram. So I guess these are certain magical symbols. The study of this pentagram could not but lead the Magi to the knowledge of the new name, which was about to raise itself above all names and cause all creatures capable of adoration to bend the knee. Let me make a disclaimer here. I'm not trying to teach this material as gospel truth. I believe in the Bible, and I believe that Jesus did come to earth, did receive the Holy Spirit, probably when he was 30 years old, was crucified when he was 33 after 3 years of teaching, and the commandment he gave the world was to love one another. And he said he would rise again from the dead after 3 days, and he did, as a spiritual entity, quite visible, you could see him. And none of that is mysterious. We're all aware that we are biological beings, most of us anyways. And that when we die, our spirit ascends, hopefully. Some people it may descend. A little joke there. Just saying, does everybody go to the same place? Do good people go where the mass murderers go? I don't think so. But that's not for me to know at this point. All we can do is the best we can do with what we know. Magic unites one and the same science. Like I said, it perfectly and incontestably reconciles these two terms that at first blush seem so opposed to each other: faith and reason, science and creed, authority and liberty. So you can have a lot of authority and a little liberty, or you can have a little authority and a whole lot of liberty. And I suppose these other things, you can have a lot of faith and maybe little reason, trying to figure it out. Or you can have no faith and rely only on your reason and think you can figure it out. It supplies the human mind with an instrument of philosophical and religious certainty, exact as the mathematics and the accounting of the ineffable infallibility of the mathematics themselves. Thus there is an absolute in the matters of the intelligence and of faith. The supreme reason has not left the gleams of the human understanding to vacillate at hazard. The supreme reason has not left the gleams of the human understanding to vacillate at the hazard. So I guess we're not going to sit there just looking like we're dizzy, wondering what's going on. Vacillate at the hazard. And I think a lot of the confusing issues today are causing people to vacillate at the hazard, when what they need to do, in my opinion, without trying to be a religious preacher, which even I don't like, but a little bit of faith in God goes a long ways. And a whole lot of faith in God goes even a longer ways. Like Jesus said, if you believe in me, you will be saved. You believe in me, and you ask God for anything in my name, you will receive it. That's pretty powerful stuff in the Gospel of St. John. There is an incontestable variety. There is an ineffable method of knowing this variety, and by the knowledge of it, those who accept it as a rule may give their will a sovereign power that will make them the masters of all inferior things and of all errant spirits, So errant spirits. Are there all kinds of spirits running around our world? Are people possessed? Seems like it's possible and probable. And sometimes it seems like it's increasing on planet Earth right now. I think some girls up in Ohio were playing with a Ouija board, and they became possessed, had to be taken away to a hospital in straitjackets. So you can become possessed, so be careful. That is to say, will make them the arbiters and kings of the world. Science has its nights and its dawns. So science has been weak and science has been strong. Because it gives the intellectual world a life which it has regulated movements and its progressive phases. It is with truths as with the luminous rays. It is with truths as with the luminous rays. Nothing of which is concealed is lost, but also nothing of which is discovered is absolutely new. I think a lot of us know that. All these discoveries we have these days, even of anti-gravity devices and energy sources, are actually ancient knowledges. Even Nikola Tesla said he was getting his information from the other world, visions and dreams and voices. So there's a lot of this out there, where a lot of the psychics have some history of their family. Famous people that we all know were psychic in their youth, and their parents were usually preachers or priests or something. Or the other 20-25% got whacked in the head with a stone or a stick, and it altered the blood flow or something to the pineal gland, and they became psychic. Some people have visited like the pyramids in Egypt I know of, and who claim after that visit they became psychic. God has been pleased to give the science, which is the reflection of his glory, the seal of his eternity. So was the God world intentionally feeding the information to Nikola Tesla and many other people? And why select certain people to be receivers of this knowledge? Do they deserve it? And what about people who are using the knowledge to create nuclear bombs and plagues to destroy humanity? What kind of bent minds do these people have? It is not the books of the philosophers, but in the religious symbolisms of the ancients, that we must look for the footprints of science. And with Zechariah Stitchin and Niebuhr and all this other stuff today coming out about the hieroglyphs in Egypt, even Aleister Crowley, the Book of the Law I went over, series number 32. Go read that. Go watch my video. So the symbolisms of the ancients, which Aleister Crowley was reviewing or sharing in his Book of the Law, which is a pretty nasty written material about the abuse and use of the rest of us to the benefit of people who think that they're better than the rest of us. In horrible way, you know, whether it's power, theft, murder, perversion. Anyways, and rediscover the mysteries of knowledge. The priests of Egypt knew, better than we do, the laws of movement and of life. So like I said, back then, during Atlantean times, before the Great Flood, the Egyptians knew, better than we do, the laws of movement and of life. The DNA and all that stuff. Building sarcophaguses, making the mummies, wrapping the bodies up, trying to preserve the DNA. What did they know about what interacts between this world and the other world by preserving the DNA of the bones? They knew how to temper or intensify actions by reaction. So these are some laws of the universe, by the way. They know how to temper or intensify action by reaction and readily foresaw the realization of these effects, the causes of which they had determined. The columns of Seth, I was reading the channeled material by a being called Seth. I made a video on that. Enoch, I've done videos on the book of Enoch. Solomon, we've all heard about King Solomon's temple. I'm making videos on the Freemasons and the Kabbalah and the Jewish people. And Hercules have symbolized in the magician, traditions this universal law of equilibrium and the science of equilibrium, or balancing of forces, had led the initiates to that of the universal gravitation around the centers of life, heat and light. So I suppose if I were a physicist, scientist, and I wanted to make some discoveries, I would probably read this and think about this stuff. Thales and Pythagoras, a couple of ancient smart people, learned in the sanctuaries of Egypt that the earth revolved around the sun, but they did not attempt to make this generally known, because to do so would have been necessarily to reveal one of the great secrets of the temple. That double law of attraction and radiation, or of sympathy and antipathy, of fixedness and movement, which is the principle of creation and the perpetual cause of life. This truth was ridiculed by the Christian Latanius, as it was long after sought to be proven a falsehood by persecution by the Papal Rome, the Roman popes. So the philosophers reasoned, while the priest, without relying on them or even smiling at their errors, wrote in those hieroglyphics that created all dogmas and all poetry the secrets of truth. So the philosophers reasoned, but the priest, just smiling at their errors, wrote in those hieroglyphics that created all dogma and all poetry, the secrets of truth. When truth comes into the world, the star of knowledge advises the magi of it, and they hasten to adore the infant who creates the future. The infant who creates the future. So would that be Jesus? And again, I'm not teaching this as biblical material. I'm teaching that this is what high-level Freemasons who reach level 32, and it's the highest level you can go in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. To get to 33, you have to be nominated. You can't apply for it. So I thought if they study this and this is their mental reasoning, then maybe we ought to ponder it and see what it says and what it doesn't say. But it keeps talking about the infant who creates the future. Seems alluding to Jesus. It is by means of the intelligence of the hierarchy and the practice of obedience that one obtains initiation. If the rulers have the divine right to govern, the true initiates will cheerfully obey. So who controls the planet? The rulers, the people we see, the presidents, prime ministers, or some kind of secret initiated into the secrets of the universe? Just thinking aloud. The Orthodox traditions which carried from Clandia, that would be over there in the Middle East, by Abraham, the Orthodox traditions over there in the Middle East by Abraham, they reigned in Egypt in the time of Joseph, together with the knowledge of the true God. Moses carried orthodoxy out of Egypt So with Moses came some commandments and laws and the secret traditions of the Kabbalah. We find a theology entire, perfect. So they're saying the Kabbalah is the theology, a religious teaching, that is entire, perfect, unique, like that which in Christianity is most grand and best explained by the fathers and the doctors, the whole of with a consistency and a harmoniousness which is not yet given to the world to comprehend. And again, I'm going to keep on saying this. I'm not preaching this material as gospel or truth. It's what they teach. And apparently their doctrine or their divine entity that they approve of is Lucifer. The Zohar, which is the key of the holy books, opens also all the depths and lights, all the obscurities of the ancient mythologies, and all the sciences originally concealed in the sanctuaries. It is true that the secret of this key must be known to enable one to make use of it, and that for even the most penetrating intellects, not initiated in this secret, the Zohar is absolutely incomprehensible and almost illegible. So if you don't know the key, understanding this material is likely incomprehensible. Well, I hope I'm reading clearly enough and throwing in my 2 cents to make this interesting, instead of just reading through it quickly and not stopping and sharing so that you might miss something. It's not the easiest thing to do. The secret of the occult sciences, occult of course means secret, and I mean the kind of secret where they swear on a Bible under threat of death if they share. You have to be initiated into. The secret of the occult sciences is that of nature itself. The secret of the generation of the angels and worlds, and that of the omnipotence of God. So these are secrets they believe they have. Ye shall be like the Elohim, knowing good and evil. So the Elohim are beings mentioned in the Bible. I guess I could describe them as the watchers or the archons, but they're spiritual beings like angels. And apparently some watchers were assigned to earth when man was created. And the sons of God found the women fair and took some of them as their wives. And the mating between these Elohim and humans was 2 different kinds of DNA. The divine angelic DNA with human DNA. And apparently it created all kinds of monsters and giants. Ye shall be like the Elohim, knowing good and evil, had the serpent of Genesis said, and the tree of knowledge became the tree of death. So remember, the serpent in the Garden of Eden tempted Adam and Eve to eat the apple, the tree of knowledge, which God told them to not eat of, and they were living realistically. How am I saying this? They were living virtually in the Garden of Eden. I get a little worn out speaking sometimes. So they were living in this beautiful garden. And the Lord had a commandment, don't eat of that tree. And apparently, whether it's a metaphor or whatever, it was the tree of knowledge, which opened up their eyes. And they looked at each other and said, you're naked. And she said, you're naked. And they grabbed some leaves and covered up. So when God came walking, this is biblical stuff, into the garden later on, Adam, Eve, where are you? And they were hiding in the bushes. They said, we're in here in the bushes. Why are you in the bushes? Because we're naked. And God said, who told you you were naked? Did you eat of the tree of knowledge? Anyways, that's the story. Hope I played the part okay. Alright, so it became the tree of death because they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And I'm also just trying to show you what's in this 32nd degree, this teaching. For 6,000 years, the martyrs of knowledge toil and die at the foot of this tree, that it may again become the tree of life. So for 6,000 years, since this happened, that brings us to today, we as humans have been toiling and dying at the foot of this tree. The Absolute, that would be God, sought for unsuccessfully by the insensate and found by the sages is the truth and reality and the reason of the universal equilibrium. So they think there's some balance to the whole world, good and evil. Equilibrium is the harmony that results from the analogy of the contraries. Until now, humanity has been endeavoring to stand on one foot, sometimes on one, sometimes on the other. Civilizations have risen and perished, either by the anarchical insanity of despotism or by the despotic anarchy of revolt, despotic. So they're trying to create anarchy now, and apparently with the burning of the phoenix and the rising of the phoenix, a lot of the satanic rituals we're seeing these days, civilizations have risen and perished, either by anarchical insanity or by despotism or by the despotic anarchy of revolt. So they're trying to bring about this anarchy situation now, chaos. They want to destroy this whole reality we know. Some people who think they can rebuild a new world without us and maybe genetically modify some kind of new human slave race for them. Just throwing my own 2 cents in here. To organize anarchy is the problem which the revolutionists have and will eternally have to resolve. So the revolutionists, apparently the Jewish people have a propensity for revolutions, according to the Encyclopedia Judaica I went over. It is the rock of Siphonis, that will always fall back upon them. To exist a single instant, they are and always will be a fatality reduced to improvise a despotism without other reason of existence than necessity, and which consequently is violent and blind as necessity. Man, I'm having trouble reading these words and these combinations. We escape from the harmonious monarchy of reason. I like these combinations. We escape from the harmonious monarchy of reason, only to fall under the irregular dictatorship of folly. It's interesting to read Albert Pike's readings, but then again, it doesn't look like his readings. It looks like something from a higher world. And apparently Albert Pike was in communication with an interdimensional being called a master, like Helena Blavatsky, like Alice Crowley, like many people who are into channeling. That's why I'm going over the channeled material, just to see what their story is, and does it match what this story is. And so far, I'm finding similarities. Sometimes superstitious enthusiasms, sometimes the miserable calculations of the materialist instinct have led astray the nations, and God at least urges the world on toward believing reason and reasonable beliefs. So do we want to believe the science and the reasons that they teach us, or do we want to believe in God and have faith? Because I think they limit us when they're trying to take away God in the spirit world. We have had prophets enough without philosophy, and philosophers without religion. The blind believers and the skeptics resemble each other, and are as far the one as the other from the eternal salvation. In the chaos of universal doubt, and of the conflicts of reason and faith, the great men and seers, psychics, have been but infirm and morbid artists, seeking the beau idea at the risk and peril of their reason and life, living only in the hope to be crowned They are the first to do what Pythagoras in so touching a manner prohibits in his admirable symbols. So they use symbols. They rend crowns and tread them underfoot. Seems to be a little poem here. I'll try to read it. Or some kind of little couple of sentences. Light is the equilibrium of shadow and lucidity. Movement is the equilibrium of inertia and activity. Authority is the equilibrium of liberty and power. Wisdom is the equilibrium in the thoughts which are scantillaceous and rays of the intellect, which are the scantillations and rays of the intellect, thoughts. Virtue is equilibrium in the affections. Beauty is harmonious proportions and forms. The beautiful lives are the accurate ones. And the magnificence of nature are in algebra, the graces and splendors. Everything is just beautiful. Everything beautiful ought to be just. Everything just is beautiful, and everything beautiful ought to be just. There is, in fact, no nothing, no empty, void emptiness in the universe. From the upper or outer surface of our atmosphere to that of the sun, and to those of the planets and remote stars in different directions, science has for hundreds of centuries imagined that there was simple, void, empty space. It's pretty amazing for back in 1881, when Albert Pike died, that he would have written this material. And apparently much more. Comparing finite knowledge with the infinite, the philosophers know little more than the apes. So comparing the finite knowledge with the infinite, the philosophers, historically, know little more than the apes. That's probably with the people today. If they want to know what the finite is all about, the infinite. In all that void space are the infinite forces of God, acting in an infinite variety of directions, back and forth, and never for an instant inactive. So that's what I'm saying. This room around me, which you see, and where you are, everything is in motion. It's almost like a super duper projector. A matrix reality, maybe? We're all part of the mind of God somehow, because when we all pray, it works. They don't want you to pray. In all of it, active through the whole of infinity, is the light that is the visible manifestation of God. The earth and every other planet and sphere that is not a center of light carries its cone of shadow with it as it flies and flashes round in its orbit. But the darkness has no home in the universe. To illuminate the sphere on one side is to project a cone of darkness on the other. And error also is the shadow of truth with which God illuminates the soul. So they talk about God illuminates the soul. Do we have souls? I believe we do. And all that void also is the mysterious and ever-active electricity and heat in the omnipresent ether. So we have around us electricity, heat, and the ether, all the air and the sky. And apparently a lot of spiritual beings exist in the ether. At the will of God, the invisible becomes visible. At the will of God, the invisible becomes visible. Two invisible gases, combined by the action of force of God, compressed, become and remain water that fills the great basins of the seas, flows in the rivers and rivulets, leaps forth from the rocks or springs, and drops upon the earth in rains, and whitens as it snows, and bridges the Danube with ice, and gathers in vast reservoirs in the earth's bosom. So like I said, that would be H2O, hydrogen and oxygen. Thank you, God, for that. we humans wouldn't exist. Most of us are made up, not most of us, all of us are made up of a high percentage of water. God manifested fills all the extension that we foolishly call empty space in the void. So again, I'm not trying to teach this stuff as a philosophy. I just think it's a smart thing to do to kind of learn what the 32-degree Freemasonry, the highest degree you can study for and try to get. And all these people that belong to these lodges all over the world who operate in secret, and out of these lodges they seem to be pulling the people they put in charge of governments and organizations. And they appear to be doing sinister things to we the people on planet Earth. Like the Illuminati, like the Zionists, like the Communists. We're not getting the straight story. That's my opinion. And everywhere in the universe, what we call life and movement results from the continual conflict of forces or impulses. Whenever these active antagonisms ceases, the immobility and inertia, which are death, results. So we need everything to be in motion, or death results. If, says the Kabbalah, the justice of God, which is severity or the female, alone reigned, creation of imperfect beings such as man would from the beginning have been impossible, because sin, being congenial with humanity, that's like a congenial disease, something you have when you're born, congenital disease. So because sin being congenital with humanity, so we have it when we're born, the infinite justice measuring the sin of the infinity of the God offending against must have annihilated humanity at the instant of its creation, and not only humanity but the angels, since these also, like all created by God, less than perfect, are sinful. So apparently these angels that God created are also sinful like man. Like I talked about the Watchers, the Archons, and Nephilim, mentioned in the Bible. Nothing imperfect would have been possible. If, on the other hand, the mercy or benignity of God, the male, were nowise counteracted, sin would go unpunished, and the universe would fall into chaos of corruption. So they're saying if God had only created women, that would have been a problem. If He'd only created man, that would have been a problem. There wouldn't have been any counteracted force to control everything. So I'm interpreting. Let God but repeal a single principle of law, of chemical attraction or sympathy, and the antagonist forces equilibrated in matter released from constraint would instantly expand all we term matter into impalpable and invisible gases, such as water or steam is when confined in a cylinder and subject to the immense degree of that mysterious force of the deity, which we call heat, is by its expansion released. So if these laws of the universe, any one of them were to be retracted by God, everything would turn into nothingness, big fire. Incessantly, the great currents and rivers of airflow and rush and roll from the equator to the frozen polar regions, and back from these are the torrid equatorial realms, necessarily incident of these great, immense, equilibrated, and beneficent movements caused by the antagonism of the equatorial heat and the polar cold are the typhoons, tornadoes, cyclones that result from conflicts between rushing currents. So all these forces that God created controls our weather. These and the benign trade winds result from the great law. God is omnipotent, but effects without causes are impossible. and these effects cannot but sometimes be evil. And I read that a couple times, and I wholeheartedly agree. Effects without causes are impossible. So when they're using those planes and dumping chemicals in our sky, effects without causes are impossible. And these effects cannot but sometimes be evil. So I think what they're dumping in the sky is evil. When they're using those HARP systems, HARP, microwave transmitters, they're causing these electromagnetic effects in our atmosphere. And it says here, effects without causes are impossible. I agree with that. You should not mess with Mother Nature. And these effects cannot but sometimes be evil. The fire would not warm if it could not also burn the human flesh. The most virulent poisons are the most sovereign remedies when given in due proportion. The evil is the shadow of the good and inseparable from it. So it's interesting to read what's in this material. The divine wisdom limits by equipoise the omnipotence of the divine will or power. The divine wisdom limits the divine will or power, and the result is beauty or harmony. The arch rests not on a single column, but springs from one on the other side. So you can't have an archway with one column. You got to have two columns for an archway. So is it also with the divine justice and mercy, and with the human reason and human faith. That purely scholastic theology, issue of the categories of Aristotle, of the sentences of Peter Lombard, that logic of the syllogist, which argues instead of reasoning, finds a response to everything by subtilizing on terms, wholly ignored the Kabbalah dogma and wandered off into the dear vacuity of darkness. Can't believe I said all that. It was less a philosophy, or a wisdom than a philosophical axiom, replying by means of springs and uncoiling its thesis like a wheeled movement. Sometimes I read some of these sentences and I go, what is that? It was not the human verb, but the monotonous cry of a machine, the inanimate speech of an android. It was also fatal precision of mechanism instead of a free application of rational necessities. St. Thomas Aquinas crushed with a single blow all this scaffolding of words built up one on the other by proclaiming the eternal empire of reason is that magnificent sentence. A thing is not just because God wills it, but God wills it because it is just. The proximate consequence of this proposition, arguing from the greater to the less, was this. A thing is not true because Aristotle has said it, but Aristotle could not reasonably say it unless it was true. Seek then, first of all, the truth, justice, and the science of Aristotle will be given to you in addition. So if you seek truth and justice, and the science of Aristotle will be given to you in addition. It is the fine dream of greatness of the poets that hell became useless. It is to be closed at length by the aggrandizement of the heaven. That the problem of evil is to receive its final solution, and that good alone, necessarily and triumphant, is to reign in eternity. So the Persian dogma taught that Ahriman and his subordinate, ministers of evil, were at last, by means of a redeemer and mediator, to be reconciled with deity, and all evil to end. But unfortunately, the philosopher forgets that all laws of equilibrium and seeks to observe the light in a splendor without shadow, and movement is an absolute repose. that would be the successant of life. So long as there shall be a visible light, there will be a shadow proportion to that light. Whatever is illuminated will cast its cone of shadow. Repose will never be happiness if it is not balanced with the analogous and contrary movement. Not balanced by an analogous and contrary movement. This is the immutable law of nature, the eternal will of the justice, which is God. The same reason necessitates evil and sorrow in humanity, which renders indispensable the bitterness of the water of the seas. So I'm only going to read these 2 pages next, and I'll be finished with this video. So there were like 12 pages, 12 double pages, that'd be 24. So I'm only doing 10 or 12, half of the 32nd degree. And when I make the next video, it'll be the second half of the 32nd degree. Alright, let's see if I can finish this without burning up my lungs. It does wear me out sometimes. Alright, here also harmony can result only from the analogy of contraries. So they say we have to have contraries to have harmony. So they give us the Republican and Democratic Party. 50% of the people, almost exactly, they always have to contest the elections. Is that some way where they can control harmony of the world for themselves and control? Playing the 2 parts off against each other? That's what I think when I read some of this stuff. Which is above, and what is above exists by reason, and what is below. It is the depth that determines the height. And if the valleys are filled up, the mountains disappear. So if the shadows are effaced, the light is annulled, which is only visible by the graduated contrast of gloom and splendor. Universal obscurity will be produced by an immense dazzling. Like I said, sometimes you read this stuff and you go, what? Even the colors in the light only exist by the presence of the shadow. It is the threefold alliance of the day and night and the luminous images of the dogma, the light made shadow, as the Savior is the Logos made man. So the Savior was Jesus, and now they're calling him the Logos made man, God. Logos means the word or ground or discount or accord. I go look up these words when I don't understand, trying to get a bit of understanding on this stuff. And all this reposes on the same law, the primary law of creation, the single and absolute law of nature, that of distinction and harmonious ponderation of the contrary forces in the universal equipoise. The 2 great columns of the temple that symbolizes the universe are necessity, or the omnipotent will of God, which nothing can disobey, and liberty, the free will of his creatures. So the 2 columns you see at the front of the Freemasonic lodges, they got those 2 big columns. So the 2 great columns of the temple that symbolizes the universe are necessity, or the omnipotent will of God, which nothing can disobey, and liberty, or the free will of his creatures. Apparently to our human reason antagonistic, the same reason is not incapable of comprehending how they can be in equipoise. The infinite power and wisdom could not so plan the universe and the infinite succession of things as to leave man free to act, foreseeing that each would at every instant think and do to make of the free will and free action of each an instrument of aid in effecting its general purpose. Whatever that all meant. For even a man foreseeing that another will do a certain act is no wise controlling or even influencing him, may use that action as an instrument to effect his own purposes. The infinite wisdom of God foresees what each will do, and uses it as an instrument of exertion of his infinite power, which yet does not control the human action so as to annihilate its freedom. The result is harmony, the third column that upholds the lodge. The same harmony results from the equipoise of necessity and liberty. The will of God is not for an instant defeated or thwarted, and this is the divine victory, and yet he does not tempt nor constrain men to do evil. So apparently God doesn't tempt man to do evil or constrain man not to do evil. So it says here. And thus his infinite glory is unimpaired. Again, I'm going to say it again. I'm not trying to teach this stuff as something you should believe, but I'm showing you what they're saying. And is it an opposite philosophy, theology, teaching than God's teaching or what Jesus taught? I suppose I have a long ways to go to try to figure it out. The result is stability, cohesion, and permanence in the universe, and undivided dominion and autocracy of the deity. And these victory, glory, stability, and dominion are the last four separate of the Kabbalah. So this is secret doctrine. This is Kabbalah teaching. And many Kabbalists, at least we forget, have been accused of sorcery, witchcraft. And these Illuminati, Kabbalistic, maybe Talmudic, I believe, and witchcraft and all that, they're into human sacrifices and opening portals to other dimensions and other beings. So I have to keep all that in the back of my mind here while I'm reading this stuff. What is it saying? And then when I read the Secret Doctrine by Helena Blavatsky or the Kabbalah, I'm going to remember what I read here. Does that make sense? I am, God said to Moses, that which is, was, and shall ever be. But the very God in his unmanifested essence, conceived of as not yet having created, and as alone has no name. Such was the doctrine of the ancient sages, and it is so expressly declared in the Kabbalah. They got this symbol for a name. You can see it there. Right under my finger. Right there, right straight down under my finger, 2 sentences. So these secret names of God are supposed to have power. That's why I showed you that. Is the name of the deity manifested in a single act, that of creation, and containing within himself an idea, an actuality, the whole universe to be invested with form and be materially developed during the eternal succession of the ages. As God never was not, so he never thought not, and the universe has no more had a beginning than the divine thought of which it is the utterance, no more than the divine himself. So there was no beginning to the universe, or apparently ending, and the duration of the universe is but a point halfway upon the infinite line of eternity. And God was not inert. So it wasn't nothingness. And uncreative. So God wasn't just sitting around doing nothing. He wasn't inert. And uncreative during the eternity that stretches beyond that point. And this seems to be some of the teaching I've read in the Secret Doctrine by Helena Blavatsky. Mysticism. Kabbalistic material. The archetype of the universe did not exist in the divine mind. The Word was in the beginning with God, and was God. And the ineffable name is that not of the very essence, but of the absolute manifested as being or existence. For existence or being, said the philosophers, is limitation. And the very deity is not limited nor defined, but it is all that may possibly be, besides all that is, was, and shall be. Here's something interesting. Reversing the letters of the ineffable name, that name I just showed you, those letters, Hebrew letters, and dividing it, it becomes bisexual. So now we're talking about the devil, or Baal, all these pictures of bisexual beings. And of course, the New Age is promoting the bisexual behavior of mankind. And at least we forget in the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah, and stuff like that, God found those activities to be abhorrent. Just pointing it out, it's in here. Dividing it, it becomes bisexual as the word, and there's another Hebrew thing here, called Yahi or Jah, like Jehovah, is, and discloses the meaning of much of the obscure language of the Kabbalah, and is the highest of which the columns, Jachem, and Bows are the symbol. So those two symbols in the Freemasonic Lodge, Jachem and Bows, are mentioned here. So let me take a look at that. Let's take an interesting look at these magazines. 1970, The New Age, that's the name, and I have made videos on this, series number 26. But notice the beings down on the bottom there, with that person between under the head of that guy, and the feet. And over here we have the T with a circle on top, and the snake by the neck. The T means divine, the circle means serpent. Divine serpent. And the serpent is around his neck. See the cobra? The snakes? The hieroglyphics on the bottom. But anyways, notice the two columns I just mentioned. Jachem and Bows are the symbols. In the image of the deity, we are told God created the man. This is 1962. I made videos on these. Like I said, series number 26. Notice on the top, the two-headed bird. The pyramid, the light's rays. This is 1934. They've been producing these New Age magazines all along. This is a Scottish rite of Freemasonry. The same thing from this material, the book we're reading. These temple lodges are in every town. $19.49. Go watch my videos I made on these. And remember, this is part 12 of Morals and Dogma. So I have 11 other parts in the series, Freemasonry. What series number was this? $105? No, that was 85, Morals and Dogma. And I'm just doing part 12. So series number 85. And 1927. So I'm just trying to say here, New Age, get it? Lodges all over the world. Look in the back of this book. These are all the states and cities with lodges. That was one page. Those were just states in the there's Puerto Rico. Yeah, this is just the United States. And here's another page on the list. So quite a few lodges and temples all over the world. And then, of course, they have all kinds of material for sale. Back then. Stuff you could buy, advertised. And apparently the Freemasons were anti-Christians. You can read the creed. And they got more books for sale on the back of this thing. No small thing, I keep saying. So I only have another paragraph or so to read here. In the image of deity, we are told God created the man, male and female created he them, and the writers symbolizing the divine by the human then tells us that the woman, at first contained in the man, was taken from his side. So Minerva, goddess of wisdom, was born of a woman and in armor of the brain of Jove. Isis was the sister before she was the wife of Osiris. Interestingly enough, they had a son named Horus, and that's represented as the all-seeing eye on the back of the dollar bill above the pyramid. All this New Age stuff is connected. Hieroglyphics in Egypt. Satan, Lucifer, Ra, Baal, Moloch. Those, they were putting the statue of Baal, the devil, in the courthouse in Oklahoma City. And then the people created such a stir, they moved it to Detroit. Then in New York and London, they were putting the archway of Baal, the devil, big archway. And the people, again, there was a big stir, so they renamed it the Archway of Palmyra or Titus. And later on I found out UNESCO, out of the United Nations, they were putting 1,000 of these archways around the world. Then we all, if you haven't seen it, most of us have seen those weird rituals of CERN, the collider, in Geneva and Switzerland. And interestingly enough, Geneva is the long-time homeland of the Illuminati and the origin of the Frankenstein and I think some of the vampire stories and stuff. Wow. Get it? CERN? Frankenstein? And then within Braun, another one of these ancient theologies, beings, the source of all, the very God, without sex or name, was developed Maya, the mother of all that is. The Word is the first and only begotten of the Father, and the awe with which the highest mysteries were regarded has imposed silence in respect to the nature of the Holy Spirit. The Word is light and the life of humanity. It is but for the adepts, the people who get initiated, to understand the meaning of the symbols. So I read up to page 490. And you can see page 850 and 851 I have not read yet. So there's exactly the same amount of pages I just read left to do in the 32nd degree. I don't know if you've caught anything in all that material, or it gives you any idea of their philosophy or what it all means. Like I said in the beginning of this video, the way that I understand a lot of it is just by repetition. Just really, leaning back, taking my time, hitting pause, looking up something I don't understand, and just going with it. And this is going to be number 12. So if I have 2 hours each, that's 24 hours. But I think some of these videos, including this one's a little shorter. So 20 hours, 19 hours. And of course I have 350 other videos. Almost 500 hours on similar topics or other things related to things in the world, which I believe everything is connected, including the UFOs, aliens, the New World Order, New Age, Zionism, communism, world wars, all this control, murder, chaos, anarchy. We got some forces bent on evil, and I think they don't want people to believe in God or understand the power that we have. Our own power to manifest our reality. If you think about something hard enough and long enough, apparently you bring it about. So this stuff that they're feeding us on the TV, the movies, and all this insanity and debauchery, murder and killing and all kinds of other craziness, the more you think about something, the more you bring it about. So they're deceiving us and mind controlling us to bring about a reality that they want. We, with free will, can realize this and start thinking about or talking about a different kind of reality, and we can bring that about. Knowledge is power. Thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting.